Even though my heart is singing, guess I can't say why. I just can't be soft and clean. Sure, I know it's wrong, but that's how I Darling, je vous aime beaucoup. Je ne sais pas what to do. Vous avez completely stolen my heart. Matin, midi, et le soir, toujours wondering how you are. That's the way I felt right from the start. Ah, chérie, my love for you is très, très fort. Wish my friend was good enough. I'd tell you so much more. Mais j'espère that you complete tous les choses you mean to me. Darling, je vous aime beaucoup. I love you, yes, I do. Ah, chérie, my love for you is très, très fort. Wish my friend was good enough. I can tell you so much more. Just spell that you complete to the shows you mean to me. Darling, je vous aime beaucoup. I do love you.
Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? Hmm, any-
Good, good.
Thank you. I'm getting stuff in the chat. Excellent. I'm glad Elizabeth and Ramat are, are doing good. It's a gray day, right? Did the sun come out finally? I don't know if it has. I can't tell. So I don't know if you heard music. It's more people, more students. I decided instead of leaving silence in the beginning, I'll put some music because at one time it was silent and students were like, is the professor there? What's going on? You know, there was, so I put, so I don't, if you heard music, the music that was playing was, I just would happen to be listening before class began. And that was just a singer named Eartha Kitt, who I can't remember now when she died. She died a while ago, but she was popular in the 60s, I think the 50s and 60s, and even the 70s and 80s. She did some stuff, but she was marketed as a sex kitten, like a sexy woman, sexy singer. But I love her because she was also a contradiction, that even though this was her persona and she, Diamond's her girl's best friend kind of thing, that she does a version of it and a song called Santa Baby, that's all about like give me expensive things for Christmas. That she was also very political in her life and was a civil rights activist and worked with lots of the greats of the 50s and 60s and was even banned from the White House. So there's, there's a documentary I haven't seen on another singer right now called, the singer's name Billie Holiday. And so some of you don't know her, but she was a singer that, you know, had a particular voice, and there have been documentaries made on her. But there was one that was made recently on Billie Holiday that talks about a song. One of her famous signature songs is a song called "Strange Fruit," and maybe one day I'll play it for you. But you're giving me, I'm coming with an idea for a different kind of course or a different way to bring discussions into English 111. But Strange Fruit is this kind of melancholy song, and Strange Fruit is about lynching, and how Black people were lynched. I say in the South, they were lynched more than the South, but the South of the United States of America is famous for, the lynchings where they would take Black, mainly men, but women were lynched as well, and children, um, and hang them by their necks from a tree, and sometimes burn them, and all kinds of stuff. It was, very dark activity that happened in this country. And so she did the song called Strange Fruit, and this strange fruit is like the strange fruit hanging from trees. So she was making this comparison between, or this metaphor of fruit hanging, that people were hanging, that's the strange fruit that were hanging from the trees. And so she was advised not to make that song, that it would ruin her career, etc. But she insisted on having it recorded, and so it's a song that persists today. So I'll write the name of the song in the chat since I spent so much time talking about it, and I won't play it for you today, or maybe I'll play it at the beginning of another class. Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday. And ironically, now that I mentioned this, I live in Harlem on 141st Street. And apparently, Billie Holiday for a while lived in Harlem on 139th Street. And I always try to find out which is the building that, or the place that Billie Holiday lived while she was in Harlem. So if I find that out, I'll take one of those walking tours or look it up. But if any of you find out where Billie Holiday lived in Harlem, let me know. So from Billie Holiday, we go to Raymond Carver. And so we are going to finish up with Raymond Carver because I felt like we were coming in for a landing with the class. And I just was like, all right, class, the time is up. Let's just stop. We got Wednesday. So yeah, I put together the syllabus. It's very ambitious. So I want to put together lots of things for us to read and do, but we will get to what we need to get to. And I think even if we discussed 2 stories or 3 stories in this class, you would have gotten at least some foundational discussion. But the reason why we do more than 1 and more than 2 is because with every story, hopefully we could look at it, see things from a different perspective. We can learn something different. We can see what's similar in terms of, if we're talking about fiction, how similarly they all have what fiction should have, which are characters, which is a plot, right? Which is setting, right? Those should be 3 basic things. We can talk about stories from the angle of dramatic structure. We can talk about them from plot. We can talk about them from themes. We can even talk about them from other elements of fiction and poetry. Now we can add fiction to it, like symbolism. So we have more. We have more in ways in which we can talk about literature and look at literature and then ultimately write about it, right? So let's continue with Raymond Carver. And I will pause in case anybody has questions. I'll look at the chat. I'll listen. Okay. So if not, then I will, let's finish up Raymond Carver and then we'll Tarzan swing into the next story that we're going to look at this week. So let me get it up because I think I have my Raymond Carver already all open and ready. And I do, and I'm going to hit share screen. And here we go. So where we left off, just to give a little bit of a recap, we read Raymond Carver's Cathedral. You were asked to look at 2 aspects of it. One had to do with the epiphanic ending, the epiphany. Like, so what did you think of this ending? And last class, we went through your responses. So I'm going to just pop up a minute. And so you said things like, I'll just pick a random one. When the narrator draws the cathedral with Robert and closes his eyes, he has an epiphany during which he can truly see for the first time. Oh, this is when they got chopped. For the first time, more than ever, he can ever see with his eyes open. Let me just clean this up a second because I think that may be part of it, but this is a good chunk, right? So let's see. When the narrator draws a cathedral with Robert and closes his eyes, he has an epiphany during which he can truly see for the first time more than he ever could see with his eyes open. That's one response that one of your students, one of your classmates said about the epiphanic ending. I'll just go to another page and pick another one. Maybe I'll start with the top because it looks juicy. When the narrator sketches a cathedral with Robert and closes his eyes and sees more than he did before, giving the narrator the feeling and sense of, for the first time, the narrator closes his eyes and feels like Robert. He was in Robert's shoes at this point. After all the jealousy and hate that he had for Robert, he realized that Robert felt being blind, actually seeing beyond only the surface, right? So that's another response. And I'll pop to another page. And no, I think there were 3 pages of your responses. Well, maybe there were 2. Okay. Then the third page was the page that, that is part of the handout that I have as part of the handout. And it says basically identifying the moment when he draws the cathedral and closes his eyes, he can see more than he ever could with his eyes open. So before the narrator draws the cathedral, his world is simple. He can see and Robert cannot, right? So there's just all these ideas of what you see, how you see. Do you see with your eyes? Do you see with your eyes, your mind's eye, right? So there's all this idea of seeing and thinking. So we talked a little bit about the story, the arc of the story, how it begins with a couple. We know there's a husband and a wife. The wife is going to go pick up her, a former employer, but it seemed like a mentor and a friend, Robert, who is blind and who just lost his wife. And so the husband feels uncomfortable about this. We talked about the characters, and the husband is, let me just not even make up the words. Just go over to what you said, that he was ignorant, that he was rude, that he was jealous, that he was not necessarily a sweet guy. That was me. He was insensitive, he was closed-minded, he was insecure. We talked about the narrator in that way. And that Robert, the man that was coming to visit, was open-minded, was nice, was lonely, was caring, insightful, blind, friendly, and wise. The wife was caring, that she was lovely, that she was a writer, she wrote poetry, that she was tough and strong or strong-willed, right? So we talked about these people coming together. And one of the things they do is they talk, right? And they have dinner, and they drink a lot through this piece. I think I clocked like 8 times that they're having a drink in this story. And we talked a little bit about how liquor can affect your mood, can affect how you behave, right? And so that's what happens. And then after dinner, they smoke, they have another drink, and they smoke some weed, and then the watching TV. And one of the things that the I don't know if it happens anymore because I actually don't watch network television, not because I have anything against it. If I did a 360, you would say I don't have a television in my house. I watch Netflix. I'm not like a person that down with TV. I do watch Netflix and stuff on my computer, Hulu and stuff, but I just watch it on my laptop. I don't have a big giant screen in my house. But there was a time that network television, the televisions ended, right? So like, let's say they'd have programming and they would end at 4 in the morning, and then from 4 to 7, those 3 hours, you would just see snow. It would just be like a hit, like zzz, and a bunch of like snow. It looked like snow, like not literally snow falling from the sky, but like a lot of little tiny fragmented pieces of white on the screen. Until the station kicked back on, and then at 7 o'clock the news show began. Then they began programming, and they were on the air. So anyway, they're watching a TV show about a cathedral, and then Robert paints it. The blind man asks him to draw it. He finds paper and a pen, and he says, "Press hard on it." And so at one point they're drawing together, right? And at one point in the story, he says he puts his hand, right? Robert puts his hand over him, and together they are drawing this cathedral, right? Putting sections of it together. And so there's this connection that happens with them. And then there's a different way. Remember, Robert also sees with his hands, right? That's how Robert sees. Like he touches the the painting, and he's able to, with the lines, create an image. And blind people read with Braille, raise a whole system of raised dots that blind people can then make out as letters and read, right? He touches the wife's face, right, to see her, right? So another way that Robert sees is with his hands, right? So anyway, they have this moment, and then at the end, we read it in class. He says, you know, he asks the narrator to close his eyes and continue drawing. Then he says, open them, but the narrator keeps them closed, and he says, that he has experience. He was there, but he was nowhere, right, at the same time. And he has his experience. He gets to see a different way. So that's kind of like the arc of it. So I just have a question, because one of the ways we can look at a story is through themes. So I'd like to invite you to either unmute yourself or to write in the chat any themes that you think. And remember, the theme is a main idea of a story, right? So can you identify any of the themes in Cathedral? Like, what is the story about? You can unmute, or you could chat away. What are the themes in the short story Cathedral? Give you a moment to think about that. I'll do present so you can see it big. Okay, any thoughts? Okay, here, let me open up the chat. Let's see. Realization. Okay, we could expand that. The jealousy that the narrator had for the blind man. Jealousy, definitely a theme inside of here. Empathy and listening, Stacy offers. Definitely. Actually, that's interesting, because I think we could look at that from different lenses. Let's just go through the list. About the husband learning to be empathetic. Yes. So definitely those are some of the themes that are inside of this cynicism. Okay. Yeah. Coral, like, is sarcastic. As a theme, yeah, you can talk about how the theme of cynicism or sarcasm works, particularly from the point of view of the character. And let's see, so we've got a nice list here, right? Let me, oops, go back here. Let me actually stop sharing. This is one of the things here, right? So I'm going to write them in here, right? So we have realization, right? Or like we could even say like the idea of an epiphany, right? We've got that. We have jealousy, right? The narrator feels. I'm going to move the chat box out the way. So the narrator feels for the blind man, right? Let's see, empathy. Which is basically the understanding this listening as another theme, right? I'm listening separately, right? How the characters communicate, right? And listen. What else have we got here? empathy, cynicism, sarcasm. Okay. From the perspective of the Nazarene and the husband. And realizing the meaning, opening his eyes, right, to be the other world. I'm just going to copy that and add that up here, right? Realist, whoops. And we have insecurity. Rama is asking that too. Yeah. People answer Viviano's question. Is anyone else connection choppy?
Professor,
Yeah.
can you explain me what does the word, I don't know how to say that word, but it's like epiphany, that word.
Yeah, that one, epiphany, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so epiphany, sometimes epiphany is a type of realization, like when you realize something. But it's not just like, oh, I thought that was, it's a realization that is accompanied with a change, right? Um, let me let me I thought I put the definition here. The definition is in the assignment. So that's what an epiphany is. An epiphany is so when you have a realization, but the realization helps you, like a change happens, right? Like the it's interesting because if you go to the Christian religion, they call like Christ's birth an epiphany, right? And an epiphany is like this realization that something has happened in the world and now everything's going to be different. So in the story, the way the epiphany looks is that we meet a character, the husband, who is very, as we said, there's ignorant, there's insecurity. He has all these judgments against the blind man, right? And then he draws a cathedral. And then suddenly he has this realization. He closes his eyes and something happens to him, right? He has an experience and a feeling that changes him. And so that's the epiphany, that something happened, the experience that leads to a change, to a bigger change, right? So is that helpful, Dana?
Okay, yes, Professor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's important. Thank you so much for asking the question, because we're talking about an epiphany, and if anyone is not clear about what we're talking about, it's important to stop, because once you do, then what we discuss and what your classmates share will make more sense, and that's what I want. I want you all to be on the same page, on the train, not the kid on the platform, right? So yeah, so great. So we've got these themes. Let me see, insecurity, and definitely the theme of insecurity, particularly on behalf of the husband, right? So we can talk about that. So let me make these a little bigger, and these are all, what you are offering as possible themes in this story. So let's say if you were going to write a paper about the themes in Cathedral, you can certainly use all of these as possible ideas for themes for as themes that you would discuss in the story. So the story has many themes. We talked about also the idea of that an epiphany, another way sometimes people describe it, as could be a religious experience, like you have a realization. There are people who have different conversions and different beliefs to different religious beliefs, and usually when you realize something that you believe a certain way, sometimes that could be considered an epiphany. Like for instance, for me, so just so you know, my own religious background is very varied. I grew up Catholic. I was the Jehovah's Witness. I was born Christian. I did pagan religion. So I've done a lot of kinds of spirituality in my life. But I remember like there was this moment when I became born again Christian, this idea of accepting Christ was like this epiphany, like this change. I understood something that I needed to do something, and then this act of in that time accepting Christ in a particular way, right? That was considered like an epiphany. So so in the story, it's not a coincidence, right? And you say, and if a coincidence, how interesting that what the image they draw is a cathedral, right? And a cathedral is a place of spirituality, right? It's grand and it's sometimes over the top, right? A hyperbolic representation of a house of worship, but and I use the word hyperbolic because hyperbole is a technique, right, that you use in literature to exaggerate, to make bigger, right? But yeah, but it's a cathedral that he draws, right? And so in a way, he has this spiritual experience. He's looking at he draws a cathedral and includes people. He said, right, at some point, put people in it. And then one of the things I mentioned in class is that it's also but it doesn't happen. The change happens in him, right? And there is also a saying that says the body is the temple of the soul, right? So in a way, a temple is like this is not necessarily a cathedral, but in a way it is. If we're talking about what cathedrals are containers of spirituality, and people believe our bodies contain our spirit, right? So there's that connection that we make with this story, right? This kind of spiritual epiphanic experience. So let's just look at a few more ideas of theme, right? So also one of the big themes in the story, which many of you identified in the Epiphany, is the difference between looking and seeing, right? So in Cathedral, the act of looking is related to physical vision, right? Like the blindness, who can see or cannot see, right? But the act of seeing requires a deeper level of engagement, right? The narrator shows that he's fully capable of looking, but he looks at his wife, his house, he looks at Robert when he's arrived, but the narrator is not blind and immediately assumes that he's therefore superior to Robert, right? But Robert's blindness, the narrator reason, makes him unable to make a woman happy, right? Let alone have any kind of normal life. The narrator is certain that the ability to see is everything and puts no effort into seeing beyond the surface, which is undoubtedly why he doesn't really know his wife very well. So Robert, however, has the ability to see, right, and a much deeper level than the narrator. And so the narrator, through the process, he learns to see at the end, right? That seeing isn't only what we do with our eyes, but seeing is what sometimes we have to go inside and see with our mind's eye, right? That like when you close your eye, what do you see? When you're seeing, it's not literally seeing, but it is seeing. It's what you're imagining, what you're thinking. That's where the place of empathy can get created, right? That if I could imagine how difficult something is, and I could put myself in that person's shoes, right? As somebody said in their comment, then you can begin to understand the other person. And that is something that is one of the powers of being a human being, right? That we have that capacity to be empathetic, right? Um, People feel like animals, I feel like dogs sometimes can have that power to be empathetic. Like they can get a sense of what you're feeling and they'll have a response and a reaction to it, right? They can connect, right? That's another way. Being empathetic is a way of connecting, right? So Robert has this, the narrator has this connection at the end of the story, right? He sees. Now, the other thing is art as insight, right? That art, right? A theme, an idea in the story is that art provides insight, right? It's something there's a creative, artistic thing can be the gateway to insight, can lead you to insight. And so in the case, we have Robert's wife, that when she's depressed, one of the things they say, she writes poetry, right? And that is a way of expression. So that's one way that art gives her insight, helps her organize what she feels. And then we have literally what they're doing, what the narrator and Robert do, is they draw a cathedral. So in this act of drawing, this act of art making, they receive insight, right? So I add these two to the list of themes in Cathedral that you can discuss. Now, I'm going to talk about two other things, and then we're going to Tarzan swing into the next story, and we'll pause for questions. So, there's something called a motif, right? And a motif is a symbolic image or idea that appears frequently in a story. So motifs can be symbols, they could be sounds, they could be ideas, they could be words. Motifs strengthen the story by adding images and ideas to the theme present throughout the narrative. So let me just break that down or actually simplify it. So motif is usually something that repeats. So it could be a symbol that repeats. It could be an idea that repeats. It could be even words, language specifically. One of the ways that repetition could work is motif is definitely about repetition, right? But it usually has a function, right? So it could be motif in terms of like a theme or idea that gets repeated in it. It could be literally a symbol that gets repeated in it. It could be, like I said, language that gets repeated in it. So, but that's the idea that it gets repeated. So in this story, there's a major symbol, right? The cathedral is a major symbol, right? Cathedrals symbolize spirituality, is where one of the aspects of religion is going within, right? To think about things, to consider people, right? To think about how you want to live your life, right? So the cathedral is a major symbol. And an example of a major motif is the drinking and the alcohol, right? That throughout the story, one of the things that gets repeated is the drinking and the alcohol. And it's not just like random, right? But it's really defining how they behave, how they act, and who these characters are, right? So that's one way to look at a motif in this thing. So again, I offer these things because these could be other lenses. Let's say if you're a person, you're like, oh wow, I realize how this thing gets repeated, or this idea in this story gets repeated, and I want to write about that. I want to write about the motifs in a paper. So you could do that as well. Or if you want that, again, you want to write about symbols, you can write about symbols, and here in this story, we've got one big symbol, and we can talk about how the tentacles and the roots of the symbol go throughout this whole story, right? That we meet this character that has this giant religious experience at the end of the piece. Okay, so that's what I want to give you in terms of. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. In terms of the story Cathedral, and any thoughts, any questions now that we've spent time on this story. Any responses or anything anybody wants to share about Cathedral by Raymond Carver? All right, I will take the silence as we're good, Professor. So unless something pops in the chat, and then I'll stop and go back to it. So we have another, good, we're at 45 minutes to talk about the next story. So I mentioned last class that we would be discussing a story called Alma by Junot Diaz, and that it was in our packet, and that you were welcome to read it. You didn't have to, but that we were going to go over it today. But if any of you wanted to venture into it, you can do so. So thanks, Elizabeth. I understand it more than before. Good, excellent. My work is done. So did anybody did anybody venture and read Alma? It's, you're not going to lose points. You could raise your, can you, I think I always forget that we're going to talk about how to do raising your hand, right? You can raise your hand, I think. Reactions, yeah. If you read the story, you can just raise your hand, say yes, and if not, or put in the chat. Okay, all right. So let's dive into Alma by Junot Diaz. Let me share my screen one moment. We'll do a little bit of an intro. We'll introduce it a little differently. Just clear. Actually, I have Raymond Carver still on my screen. Let me close it. Let me get Alma up. Okay, great. Actually, let me get here. All right, I'm going to share my screen again, and then we will go introduce you to Alma by Junot Diaz. So does anybody know Junot Diaz? Has anybody read his work before? You can unmute or in the chat, or maybe give me a thumbs up on as your reaction. I see a chat. Okay, here we go. Let me get the chat up. I think that's what happens too sometimes. Gets lost. To see everything else I'm working on. Here we go. Here's the chat. Okay. Close it. Let me see if I can get this up. All right. Nope. Yes, I have. Viviano has. Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, at least one of you have had. Viviano, do you remember what you read?
Not really. I read a story, no, a whole book in high school
Okay.
by Junot Diaz, but I forgot what story it is.
Okay. Yeah. Well. All right. So we'll just learn a little bit about him now, and now when next time somebody asks you if you read something by Junot Diaz, you're gonna say, "Yeah, I have." Right. All right. So the story we're focusing on today, and we'll do one more story by him. There's a method to the madness, but it's Alma by Junot Diaz. So he is he wrote a collection called Drown, and that's a short story collection in 1996. And then he wrote a novel called The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, and that won the Pulitzer Prize in 2007. He was born in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, and he has 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And growing up, Diaz and his siblings lived in Santo Domingo with their mother while their father was here in the US working. And then his father sent for his family when Juno was 7. And their family lived in a poor part of New Jersey populated by Dominicans. So he grew up, early childhood was in Dominican Republic, 7 years old. Him and his family come to be with their father and in Jersey. So I give that context because many of the stories are set in Jersey and very much in Dominican families and Dominican situations. So Drown received a lot of acclaim from many sources, and soon Diaz was more popular in the literary world than he imagined. Drown was translated into Spanish. He got a 2-book deal. His stories were first published in The New Yorker, which is a very prestigious magazine that also it's not just it's not just short story magazine. They only publish 1 short story per issue, but they do short stories and poems, but they do lots of articles and stuff like that. And I'm looking around, so I don't have a copy of it here, but The New Yorker's he got published in there. He's known for his spare narrative writing style, right? So it's not a coincidence that we go from Raymond Carver, who also has a very spare narrative writing style, right? And also he's known for his seamless integration of Spanish and English text. So both Drown and The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde explore the violent history of the Dominican Republic and the violence that occurs on an everyday basis in the lives of its characters. His 3rd book, remember he had a 2-book deal, Oscar Wilde, his 3rd book was This Is How You Lose Her, and was published in 2012. And Alma, the story that we're going to read, comes from that collection. So in the wake of the novel, Diaz received many awards. He received the Guggenheim, which is a very famous award, a MacArthur Genius Award, a Pulitzer Prize. So all of these awards come with big cash awards, like $50,000, $500,000, dollars. He currently works at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston, and teaches creative writing there. So that's where he works. So the blog Great Writers says that Junot Diaz is one of the generation's vast pride of literary lions. I mean, big literary lion. The Dominican American broke through big time with The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde and is now collecting awards when he's not teaching at MIT. Alma features many of Mr. Diaz's common themes and literary techniques. The second-person story stars Junior and a young man challenged by fidelity. The story employs a hyperkinetic, hyper-heterosexual diction that reads like a conversation with a lively and worldly friend. Junior is proud of his Dominican heritage, the character, and sees the world through a lens influenced by the language and culture. Diaz uses sex, curse words, and raw street language as part of a practice called the shock of representation. Okay, so basically it's saying that in this story, but in his work, he is very much uses language and uses culture the same way that Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi, who we will read a story by her, you will read a story by her at the end. Next week I'll talk about like what's going to happen next week, because next week is the last week and then we have spring break. She uses culture. She's Nigerian, and we'll read something by her. There's a story called What You Pawn I Shall Redeem by Sherman Alexie. He's Native American, he as well. So many writers use culture. And so Junez uses his Dominican culture as part of his writing, right? But then it also says that he uses sex, that he uses curse words, and he uses raw street language as part of a practice called the shock of representation. So we probably have an idea of what sex is, right? That's sexual activity or intercourse between people. Curse words are what they are. They're words that are, and sometimes people learn different languages and they learn the curse words first, but, and also uses raw street language. So these three things, they come together. This blogger calls the shock of representation, right? So shock, like what is shock? When you get shocked by something, what does it mean to be shocked? Chad,
Surprise?
surprise, yes, okay. Surprise is a good way, a good synonym for shocked, right? Any other ones? Okay.
Amazed?
Amazed, yes. Shocked has a bigger, yes, has a big implication of the unexpected, but also like the emotional reaction of like, what, you know? But yes, so shock, right? So he's talking about shock, and then it says the shock of representation, right? The idea of like that what he's showing you will be shocked, might be, he's expecting you to be shocked, right? By his style. So sex might shock some people, might not shock others. Cursing might shock some people, might not shock others. And raw street language also, right? But if I mention like the New Yorker to you, I'm getting up because I have to get you a copy. Right? If I bring the New Yorker to you, right, this is what the magazine looks like, right? It's this magazine, it's like been around for like, I think now almost 100 years maybe. And, you know, it has poetry and has all these articles. If I show you the table of contents, there is like articles like the political scene, how parties die, the trailer, let's see, letters shot in the dark, a mysterious killing in a haven, too tranquil for tragedy, reporter at large, manufacturing, diplomacy, Chinese factories, and American customers. There's, you know, critics of, there's book critics and music critics, and, you know, there's all these ideas that are happening here. So the New Yorker is a very prestigious magazine, and that's where his work is being published. So I think to the readership of the New Yorker, there's something shocking about hearing street language and cursing and sex. And actually, you know, and it is, even to many of us, might be shocking to encounter it as part of, you know, literature in a classroom. So yeah, so I think there is a level of the shock of representation. I will do two more things, and as we talk about Junot Diaz, because I think it would be, I just think it's important. So, and I put them in part of the PowerPoint, and I keep saying I'm going to upload them. So I will catch up and upload all the PowerPoints from the stories by this weekend. So that way you'll have them as a reference, because I think in a couple of weeks, I think it's April 7th, your fiction essays due April 7th. So that's still a couple of weeks away, but we're going to talk about that next class. So I keep peppering our conversations with like, you can write about this, you can write about that, you can write about from this angle, you can write about from that angle. So giving you ideas, because you've written an essay already, you've gotten your feedback on it, except for Hassan. I've got your email, Hassan, if you're in class. we will, if you can stay right after, I will connect with you.
Yeah, I'm right here, Professor.
Yeah, so that I could make sure that you have it. So so that I keep peppering it, but we're gonna spend time on Monday talking specifically about the assignments, right? And what you can do with. But there's two things that I'm adding here, and that's one, there's an article about Diaz being accused of sexual misconduct, because we talk a lot about their lives. We talked about Raymond Carver and his alcoholism. We talk about these things. I think writers are human beings, right? And they may write incredible works or write things that we feel are worthy, that we can learn from. But I think to not try to give as much information we need about them. So there's an article about him being accused of sexual misconduct, which came out in 2018. And there's also another article of him being cleared of misconduct. So we can talk about those things more. But he was accused, his offense was that he kissed somebody against their will. That's the biggest offense besides the verbal abuse and all that stuff. And I think it's important for us to understand how we form opinions about people, so that what information we use to do that. Now, I'm one that I felt that very strongly with the Me Too movement, that I think the imbalance between the power between men and women, particularly in these kinds of situations where women are cursed. We're having something right now dealing with the governor of New York, right? Being accused of using his power, not necessarily, but using his power and using like sexuality or sex as a weapon for power. And if you know, I'm getting a little deep, but I'm going to stop in 5 seconds, and then I'll pause if you have questions, but we can talk more about this. But that's what rape is defined as. It's not really, it's defined as a crime, and it's not defined as a sexual act, but it's about using sex to do something criminal, and it's usually something dominant, right? And something hurtful. So that's how it's defined. So I put this here because, we can read stories and know about, and particularly the way Juno, sometimes portrays women in his work. It just has a connection and a relationship. So I put that there. If you want to read more about it, when I upload it, you can click it and find out more. I'll give you another hint for this before we get into the story, is that your research, so we can start focusing our lens on the research paper that you're going to do, is that, which is not due till like the end of April, but we can begin thinking about it now. And so you'll have 2 different choices to choose from, 2 different assignments to choose from, and one of the assignments is about him and his work. So I say that all to you so you can start thinking about what you might want to do, understand the significance of this little section of the class. All right, I'm going to pause, and then we're going to go into the story. Any questions? Okay. So, Alan. Okay. So if there are no more questions, that is our introduction to Juno Diaz. And just bear with me one moment. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So this is a reading of the story Alma, and then we'll read it together, and then we'll talk about it. And let me make sure you can hear. The volume is up all the way. And this is at a New Yorker event, and this is a woman introducing it. She said a couple of things before this, and she basically talks about some other reading, but then she goes into the introduction of this, and she's going to introduce a young actor named Victor Rasuk, who's going to read this story.
The first event of the night is the reading of a story by Junot Diaz, the author of the story collection Drown, whose first novel, The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, won the Pulitzer Prize last year. This story, Alma, appeared in the magazine just over a year ago, and it's actually the only story I can think of in the last 10 years or so whose sexual content has actually caused canceled subscriptions. One subscriber wrote, "What on earth possessed you to publish such pornographic trash? I have given gift subscriptions to my grandson and my son-in-law, whose household includes 2 young girls. I only hope he has the good sense to tear out those pages." So here to read those pages for us tonight, very well torn out, is Victor Rasuk, who has appeared in Raising Victor Vargas, in Lords of Dogtown, and in Che, among other things. Please welcome Victor Rasuk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Valentine's Day as well. Alma by Junot Diaz. You have a girlfriend named Alma who has a long, tender horse neck and a big Dominican ass that seems to exist in a 4th dimension beyond jeans. An ass that could drag the moon out of orbit. An ass she never liked until she met you. Ain't a day that passes that you don't want to press your face against that ass or bite the delicate sliding tendons of her neck. You love how she shivers when you bite, how she fights you with those arms that are so skinny they belong on an after-school special. Alma is a Mason Gross student, one of those Sonic Youth comic book reading alternatinas without whom you might never have lost your virginity. Grew up in Hoboken, part of the Latino community that got its heart burned out in the 80s, tenements turning to flame. Spent nearly every teenage day on the Lower East Side. Thought it would always be home. But then NYU and Columbia both said, "Niet," and she ended up even farther from the city than before. She is in a painting phase, and the people she paints are all the color of mold. Look like they've just been dredged from the bottom of a lake. Her last painting was of you, slouching against the front door. Only you're frowning, "I had a lousy third world childhood and all I got was this attitude," eyes, recognizable. She did give you one huge forearm. "I told you I'd get the muscle then." The past couple of weeks, now that the warm is here, Alma has abandoned black. Started wearing these nothing dresses made out of what feels like tissue paper. It wouldn't take more than a strong wind to undress her. She says she does it for you. "I'm reclaiming my Dominican heritage," which ain't a complete lie. She's even taking Spanish to better minister your mom. And when you see her on the street flaunting, you know exactly what every nigga that walks by is thinking. You met at the weekly Latin parties at the Down Under, New Brunswick. She never went to those parties, was dragged there by her high school best friend, Patricia, who still listened to TKA. And this was how you got the chance to strike while, as your boys put it, the pussy was hot. Alma is slender as a reed. You, a steroid-addicted block. Alma loves driving. You, books. Alma owns a Saturn, bought for her by her carpenter father, who speaks only English in the house. You have no points on your license. Alma's nails are too dirty for cooking. Your spaghetti con pollo is the best in the land. You are so very different. She rolls her eyes every time you turn on the news, and she says she can't stand politics. She won't even call herself Hispanic. She brags to her girls that you're a radical and a real Dominican. Even though on the Platano index you wouldn't rank, Alma only being the 3rd Latina you've ever really dated. You brag to your boys that she has more albums than any of them do. That she says terrible white girl things while you fuck. She's more adventurous in bed than any girl you've had. On your first date, she asked you if you wanted to come on her tits or her face. And maybe during boy training, you didn't get one of the memos, but you were like, neither. And at least once a week, she will kneel on the mattress before you and with one hand pulling at her dark nipple, will play with herself, not letting you touch at all. Fingers whisking the soft of her face looking desperately, furiously happy. She loves to talk while she's being dirty too. Will whisper, "You like watching me, don't you? You like listening to me come." And when she finishes, lets out this long, demolished groan. And only then will she allow you to pull her to an embrace as she wipes her gummy fingers on your chest. "This is me," she says. Yes, it's an opposites attract sort of thing. It's a great sex sort of thing. It's a no thinking sort of thing. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Until one June day, Alma discovers that you are also fucking this beautiful girl named Lakshmi. Discovers the fucking of Lakshmi because she, Alma, the girlfriend, opens your journal and reads. Oh, she's had her suspicions. She waits for you on the stoop, and when you pull up in her Saturn and notice the journal in her hand, your heart plunges through you like a fat bandit through a hangman's trap. You take your time turning off the car. You are overwhelmed by pelagic sadness. Sadness at being caught, at the incontrovertible knowledge that she will never forgive you. You stare at her incredible legs, and between them, to that even more incredible popola you've loved so inconstantly these past 8 months. Only when she starts walking over in anger do you finally step out. You dance across the lawn, powered by the last fumes of your outrageous sinvergüencería. "Hey, muñeca," you say, prevaricating to the end. When she starts shrieking, you ask her, "Darling, whatever is the matter?" She calls you a cocksucker, a punk motherfucker, a fake-ass Dominican. She claims you have a little penis, no penis, and worst of all, that you like curried pussy. Which really is unfair, you try to say, since Lakshmi is technically from Guyana, but Alma isn't listening. Instead of lowering your head and copy to it like a man, you pick up the journal as one might hold a baby's beshattered diaper, as one might pinch a recently benutted condom. You glance at the offending passages. Then you look at her and smile. A smile your dissembling face will remember till the day you die. "Baby," you say. "Baby, this is part of my novel." This is how you lose her. Yeah.
Okay. So, thoughts, reaction to the story. What did you hear? What did you understand? Let me snooze. Okay, so we've got vulgar in some parts, right? We have, "It seems so real that his girl got angry with him." Yeah. Funny. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to play that. Sometimes I read it myself, but I kind of like Victor because he's an actor. and also we get to hear audience reaction. And I don't know if maybe you agreed with what they were laughing with, maybe you disagreed, you were like, I don't think that was funny, but we have some of one funny. Any other reactions? You can unmute, you can type.
Well, I feel like he was very descriptive about how he felt. So it's like when he felt passionate about something, he'd say it a lot more. He would say it louder and with more, I don't know what the word is, but it's like he was, yeah, very, just very, very passionate about it.
You mean the actor that was reading it? Right, yeah. So Kayla's speaking about the delivery and
Yes.
how he presented. Yeah, so how he presented that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why in a way, like he knows when to pause. He kind of does description. He even does some mannerisms so that we could, he kind of embodies the character. Sometimes he embodies the girlfriend when he's doing that as well. Yeah, so this is essentially a story about cheating, right? Here's this guy, and he has this amazing girlfriend that he describes sometimes in with lots of imagery and description, but even vulgar in some parts, as Alan shares. But he speaks about her, and then what does he do? He cheats on her, and then when he cheats on her, he tries to get away with it to the very last minute when he even, and that's the ending of that story, right? She says, she calls him out and she reads him and does all this stuff to him, calls him all this stuff. And he, says, baby, this is part of my novel, right? He lies. And then the last line of it is like, this is how you lose her, right? So at the end, he loses this amazing girlfriend because he can't either be faithful, and even more so can't cop to it like a man, right? That's language that we understand what that means when you cop to something like a man, right? That's an example of street language. So if we go back to the description, what I was talking about in terms of him using the idea of sex, idea of curse words, in terms of raw street language, for the shock of representation, Alma is one of the stories that really kind of encapsulates a lot of that. So let's look at, and certainly feel free as always to type in more things in the chat. If any of you want to unmute and say something, please do that as well. But I will also continue with things in the class, the PowerPoint that I prepared for you. Like, who could Alma represent? Alan says. What do you think? Who do you think she could represent? Because I think something that you picked up on is, in a way, one of the things that Juno is doing with story is he creates, basically we have two characters, right? Two main characters, Alma and the narrator, who we know his name is Junior, right? Because of the collection. I don't think it says it in the story, but we know that. Right. So Alma could represent the lover. Alma could represent the kind of like the contemporary modern, like Dominican woman, or the contemporary modern woman, right? Because Mason Gross student. Mason Gross is in art school, so she's an art school student. She likes to draw. She doesn't really, she feels like she has to connect to her Dominican culture. She's kind of like, she's not like a recent immigrant, right? She's somebody who's grown up here. She's comes from an immigrant family, but so there's that kind of symbolism. And then the male character, Junior, he considers him a steroid block, right? That he's this kind of muscle boy that he likes to work out, but he's not just a muscle boy. He likes books. He can make spaghetti con pollo, right? Or spaghetti with chicken. That's what it is. So so that there's all this kind of symbolic characters who these characters can represent, right? So there's another lens from which you can do a story. So let's continue with the PowerPoint. We've got 10 minutes left to class, and let's continue with presenting. All right, so we saw this. So I'm gonna go through some of the things in the story, right? So there's language is in Alma, right? So language in Alma. So there's bilingual, like Spanglish. He writes in English, he uses words and phrases in Spanish, specifically Dominican expressions. Occasionally, he drops in a popular phrase from another language, like "niet," which is Russian. So what effect does that have? Like sometimes you may understand it, you may not understand it, but that happens in literature in general. Like sometimes French is dropped in, sometimes other language is dropped in that that is there, and basically it's our job to look it up, right? If we can't get the context of it or the meaning of it from the context of the sentence, then we look it up, right? In this one, another way he uses language are curses, right? He uses lots of curses in it. He doesn't say when you have sex, he goes when you fuck, right? So he uses that word on it. He uses urban street language. One example is like, when he says cop to it like a man, when he says, I'm trying to think of another example in it, but throughout it, there's many examples, right? Like he says, and when she wears those dresses, you know what every nigga on the street is thinking, right? So he's talking to an urban audience, right? He's using urban street language. But then he drops in big words like pelagic and incontrovertible, right? He says, you get that pelagic sadness, knowing he does it in relation to another word, but he does this pelagic sadness, right? Pelagic is this word, you don't hear that word a lot. But pelagic is like so deep that it's like, think of the biggest ocean, the most deepest, most profound place. So he uses a word, he doesn't say, you got this deep sadness. He doesn't say you got this strong sadness. He goes, you got this pelagic sadness, right? And then he says, knowledge, the incontrovertible knowledge, like incontrovertible means like it can never be reversed, right? So he says that incontrovertible knowledge that she's going to leave you, like you just know it, like there's no doubt, right? So he does that. So it's interesting. He balances out. He does urban street language, so it's like speaking to the peeps, and then he does this kind of big words, right? This high vocabulary that he's speaking to, that he uses in there. Again, the same way with poetry, there's a word you don't understand, you should look it up in a word. And then the end says, what is the shock of representation in his use of language? And I think that's the place that we have been at. Like he uses all these things to grab your attention, surprise you, to make you feel amazed. And sometimes we hear worse language like this on the subway or on the bus, but to experience it in literature, he's using it with an effect, right? So the other thing we can look at are the characters in Alma, and I'm going through it quickly because class is almost over, and then I'm going to give you an assignment, and I want to have 5 minutes to talk about that. So we can look at characters in it, right? We've got Junior. Hold 1 second. My door. So we've got Junior, who we know is the narrator, right? We learn he attends Rutgers University in New Brunswick, that he's dating another student named Alma. He finds himself highly physically attracted to Alma. Junior's interested in reading books and exercising. The basis of his relationship with Alma is their physical attraction to one another and their sexual activities. And Junior secretly has a sexual relationship with a freshman student named Lakshmi, right? And when he's confronted by Alma, he lies. Junior lies and says the journal's part of his fiction writing, right? That it's a project of his. We meet Alma, and she's the title character of the story. And for those of you, Alma is also of Dominican heritage, was born and raised in Hoboken, we learn. She loves New York City, but she was rejected by NYU, by New York colleges to which she applied. And she attends Rutgers. She enjoys painting despite her apparent lack of skill. And she also enjoys driving. She's in a relationship with Junior. And this relationship is mostly sustained on the basis of their sex life together. Despite having been born in the United States, Alma's Dominican heritage is important to her. She likes that Junior was born in the Dominican Republic, and she takes Spanish lessons to have a better command of the language. So we're getting a sense of her. Alma, though, for those of you who don't know Spanish or may not know, Alma also means soul, right? So he's kind of giving her this kind of higher level symbolism in terms of like being like a good person, right? A soul, Alma. So there's symbolism, right? I'm going to go through it. Alma's body, right? Sex is another symbol in it. Lakshmi symbolizes Junior's lack of loyalty, and Junior's journal symbolizes secrets and dishonesty, right? Sex symbolizes false intimacy. Alma's body symbolizing the shallow attachment that Junior has to Alma. These are ways the symbolism works in the story. So forget about this Alma essay question. You're not doing an Alma essay on this. But that's a little quick overview of Alma. What you are going to do for our next class is read a second Junot Diaz story. It's called the Buddha Principle, right? And so for the Buddha Principle, you're going to write a short essay. And so I want you to read the Buddha Principle, and I think I'm going to hit send. I just want to make sure that it was right. Here we go. I think this is it. Yes. So for the Buddha Principle, you should do it by Sunday, by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. And it's the Buddha Principle by Junot Diaz. You're going to select either the character, you're going to meet Junior again as the narrator in that story. And we'll talk about both stories. We'll talk about the idea of second person narration. And you're going to meet the mother, you're going to meet Buddha, and you're going to meet Tammy. There's going to be at least 3 women you meet. There's the 4 horses of the apocalypse, which are some neighbors, but you're going to meet 3 characters, the mother, Buddha, and Tammy. So, so I want you to do a short character analysis of one of these characters. So organize your response into an essay that has at least 3 paragraphs, and with an introduction and a thesis, a body paragraph, and a conclusion. So you can examine characters through one of these items, right? Through personality. So as the story develops, the writer may give you direct information about the character and also offer hints about the personality of a character through the things they say, the way they act, how they move, and the mannerisms they have. So describe the personality of the character. So you can choose that. So let's say, for example, you read the story, you say, I'm going to pick the mother. So you can talk about the mother from the view of a personality. Excuse me. Or you could look at the mother, you can look at a character through the role they play. So let's stick with the mother. Let's say you pick the mother. You can also, or you can do personality, or you can do the role. So aside from expressing the unique character traits, the character will also fill a specific role in the story, right? What's their role? What's their purpose in the story? This will either be a major role as a key component of the story or a minor role as a smaller one and less significant component to the story. So explore the role that the character you choose plays. And then another way you could look at them, so there's 3 different ways. You pick one character and pick 3, you can pick one of 3 ways to look at them is the character's growth, right? So it's not a rule in the story, but a majority of the characters will go through several changes through the course of the story. So pay attention to whether the character becomes stronger, they fall apart, they learn something new about themselves, right? Discuss the growth of the development of a character. If we were doing this with Cathedral, we could talk about the narrator and the kind of growth that happens through his epiphany. We don't know what's going to happen beyond that point, but we can make an assumption, right? But here we want to look at the character's growth. So again, just go over the assignment. So do this by Sunday by 11:59 p.m. You will read this short story, The Buddha Principle. I'm going to show you where it is. It's in the course content section under the stories. You're going to select one of 3 characters. That's either the mother, Buddha, or Tammy. You're going to meet them when you read the story. And then you're going to do an analysis that's in the form of an essay, which has an intro with a thesis, 1 body paragraph on the character and the lens from which you're going to look at them, and a conclusion. And you're going to do, and the lenses could be through personality, through the role they play in the story, or through the character's growth. Okay, so I'm going to hit submit. Now it's in your forum, and I'm going to show you here in course content. I'm in our class in fiction. You click it. And then we have fiction stories, and in the stories list all our stories. And there's Alma, and there's the Buddha Principle. This is the one you will read, the Buddha Principle for class. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to pause for questions. No questions? You got it? All right, so I will follow up with an email. So you will all, right, so it will be 3 paragraphs, Catherine, that's correct. So one, not 3 paragraphs on 3 characters, not 3 paragraphs on the 3 lenses, but it would just be, right, it's just 1 character, right? It's 3 paragraphs. And the paragraphs are intro, 1 body paragraph, and a conclusion. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, you know what to do. You can sign off. If not, I'll just hang out here for a few more minutes and we can and I'll answer any questions. If not, yeah, thank you, Taizal. Good day for you. Thank you, Christian. See you next week. Hassan, I think you're going to hang out a minute, right? Thank you, Lindsay. Take care. Take care, Odalis, Ramat, Stanjay. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend as well. Thanks, Carl. Take care, Adrian. Thanks, Carlos. All right, Chantel. Kayla, right on. Yeah, I'll send an email out as well. Hey, Jessica, do you have a question? Okay.
I do.
Okay.
So, okay. So, I, I don't. You know what? I'm better to just tell you like alone, like on 101. So I'll just email you in a sense.
Email me, or if you want, you can just wait a little bit. And if everybody, there's only a few students that are left, if they leave, we can talk now. Actually, I need to speak to Hassan. So do you want to wait a second, Jessica? Do you have time?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Why don't you wait here a second? I'm gonna put you, let's see, I think I can put you in
Okay.
Professor, do you hear me?
I'm gonna put you in the waiting room, Jessica, and then I'll come back to you, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Who's speaking?
Professor, do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, okay.
So this assignment it's a three body paragraph, like introduction, three bodies, and a conclusion.
No, so it's an introduction, one body paragraph, and a conclusion, right? Because you're
Oh,
gonna look at one character and you're gonna look
Yeah,
at one of the lenses, only like personality, role, and growth. Right? If it were three lenses, right? If I had said do all three, then you probably would have three body paragraphs.
okay,
And
okay.
then the logic is, you got it?
Yeah, it's three paragraph. Okay, one character, one lens. Just okay.
Right.
All right, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Professor. Have a good
Okay.
day.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Hassan, you're there,
Yes,
right?
Professor. Yeah.
So you're saying you're unable to open your essay?
Yeah, like you sent me a link to see the correction, right? But when I click the link, telling me you need access.
Okay.
I don't know.
See, here I am. This is the poll.
I just sent you an email yesterday about that.
Yes, you mean to my email? Let me just get to you here.
Yeah, the third one.
From the top. Yeah, here you
Yeah,
go.
on the top.
Okay, so when you click this, what do you get?
When I click here, like here is a link to your grades. When I click on it, it's telling me you need access to see the correction.
All right.
I don't know what access.
Okay. And then does it tell you what to do in terms of that? Because I think the email I have is your school email. So what I'm going to do is this. So see, this is what you should be able to see. Right? It should open up and you should see all my corrections. And
I could do one thing. I could take a picture and send it to your email so you can see what I see when I click on the link.
Yeah. Can we do it the reverse? Let me see. Let me stop sharing and let me more co-host waiting room.
Professor, do you give grades for the other assignments we do on?
So I made you a co-host. You know how to share your screen? Do you see how I do it?
Nah, I don't.
Can you look at your button where it says mute, stop video, security, participants, polls, chat, all that stuff?
Security, yeah, I see that. Share.
Do you see share screen?
Yeah.
So do you want to do that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And then they show me desktop or application.
Yeah.
What I have to do.
Like
desktop?
The one on the top left.
You see it now?
Not yet.
How about now?
Yeah. It says you're sharing the screen.
When I got to English 111. Let's try here. And then you go to the discussion section. This one right here. And then here's the link. We go. Look, that's all I see.
So
You need access.
hit request access. What does it tell you when you?
Yeah, I did that. And then I'm gonna see this. You will get an email, then you know if there is shared with you. That's
Okay.
all I see.
All right, hold 1 second. And then the email that it's, and then stay with me 1 second. I'm opening up. So it's your Ostos email. And then
I emailed you from my personal email, alisawidohassan@gmail.com.
you did it from your where? And when you email me from in the
No, with the hostess email, with my personal email, like my email is alisawidohassan, my last name, my first name @gmail.com.
all right, let me try one more thing right now.
I could test send you my email if you want.
No, I see lesawi.hassan@gmail, right? Let me just try. I'm going to try adding that Gmail to the assignment.
All right.
And then see if that one here, share. All right, so now I just added that email to access. So see if it will give you, try clicking it again.
All right. So I have to do it again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I see it right now.
Okay, so let's just wait a second.
Let me see if I see the correction here.
So click, all right, go back to the top. All right, there you go. Okay, now you have it all.
Yeah, I see them right here.
Okay.
Professor, how about the other assignments, please?
What about the other ones?
I don't see any feedbacks. I don't see any grades. I don't see nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
you want
the other assignments, you don't get grades. You only get you get graded by the fact that they contribute their assignments that you need to get done. So when students do them, then they get credit for it. And in fact, let me talk about that more in the next class. So I can talk
all right.
about
And do we have do we get any feedbacks, like we have to do any correction or something like that?
With some of them, like for instance, the one that you did, the essay you did for the poetry one, this sample one, I gave feedback. And for the one that you're going to do for next week, you'll get feedback on that one too, the one you have to do for Monday.
All right, Professor. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care. I'm glad we solved it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right, Jessica. Thanks for being patient.
No problem. So I just wanted to, first thing first, I know I haven't been the best for the past couple of weeks and not submitting anything. It's just like lately it's been a lot going on personally. I'm still planning on submitting everything. I'm not gonna say I haven't started it. I have started on the assignments. I just never got to fully finish. And this is not like the only class I'm behind with. I'm also behind in other classes. But that's one thing I just want to let you know, that I'm still gonna submit them regardless. Another thing I also want to inform you is that I'm leaving out of the country as well.
Oh,
Through for a family emergency, I have to go to the Dominican Republic. I'm still gonna try my best to be in class and still do the assignments over there as well. I already put myself a goal that I want to submit as much as I can before I leave.
mhm.
Um, yeah, that's pretty much it on my behalf.
And how long will you be gone? Jessica, how long?
In my For my understanding, hopefully probably max. For me, from my understanding, hopefully in maximum probably 2 weeks. But
Well, I mean, like you know, you very well know you're already behind a little bit in class. So it's important for you to try not to fall too far behind. I mean, I would encourage you to make sure that the poetry, at least the poetry, if you're going to prioritize what you need to get done, that the poetry essay is what you do, right? Because I think that will be
okay,
important for you to do, for me to grade, and for us to be able to have a conversation. So I know you may be behind with a couple assignments, even though we have an assignment due on Monday. I would really, before Monday, try to get the poetry essay done.
okay, perfect. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right.
All
All
right,
right.
thank you so
Take
much.
care. Thanks for communicating. All right. Bye bye.
All right.